Welcome to Growing Up on WEBE Radio, where experiences become empowerment. Here's your host, Todd Weaver.
Welcome, everybody, to Growing Up. I'm Todd. I'll be your host tonight. It's Monday, October 22nd. It was a beautiful day here in the East Coast in Pennsylvania. We have a great show lined up for you tonight. I have a wonderful, wonderful guest, always a topic that's interested in me my whole life. We have with Pop Haydn. He's a master magician. He's a six-time recipient of the Magician of the Year Award from the Magic Castle, and he's got a new book out. It's called Stories of a Street Performer. Wit, or Pop, welcome to the show.
Just call me Pop. Everybody does.
Okay, Pop, welcome to the show. Really appreciate you taking time out and being with us tonight.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Tell us, let's start right at the beginning. Tell us about your earliest memories and where you grew up, those kind of things.
Well, I grew up in Clarksville, Tennessee, and my father was a Disciples of Christ minister at the time, and so I grew up as a preacher's kid in the South. I was born about 49.
Okay, what was it like? What are your earliest memories? I mean, and part of the reason I'm digging here is, the show we talk about following our dreams and our heart's desire. What were your earliest memories, and did you ever know what you wanted to be?
Well, I had different experiences. When I was a kid, I got attracted to magic very early. When I was 6 or 7, I met a missionary and his wife who were staying at our house, and he had been in Argentina, and one of his things he did was he and his wife dressed up in gaucho outfits and showed us off to the kids and at the church. But he also, when he was at the parsonage, he was putting on the mustache with the spirit gum. And he showed me a little trick with spirit gum where you could put some spirit gum on your thumb and some on your finger and let it dry. And then you could touch it together and make little whiffs of smoke that would float up in the air like you were making smoke out of your hand. So that got me very fascinated. I thought that was very magical.
And that was very early, huh? 6 years old?
I was only about 6 or 7 when I learned that. But then later, when I was about 9, there was an old man in our neighborhood who had been a gambler his whole life. And so he did puppet shows for the kids. He was in his 80s, and he would do puppet shows for kids with puppets made out of apples and carved heads out of apples and handkerchiefs for the bodies. And he was very funny and entertaining. But he had been a gambler his whole life, and he drank whiskey right out of the bottle and cussed like a sailor and chain-smoked little black cigars. So naturally, as a preacher's kid, I gravitated toward his society, and he taught me little tricks with his shell game and how to deal cards from the bottom of the deck and little gambler's tricks and stuff, which I found fascinating.
Talk about that, being a minister's son, if you were from. I mean, did you have other siblings, and was there a lot of nurturing?
I had an older brother and an older sister and a younger brother,
mm-hmm.
And my father he didn't mind magic at all. He didn't think I was going to get involved in gambling or the shell game or anything like that, which I did later. But I basically turned all that stuff into magic tricks. It's hard to get a high stakes game going when you're a preacher's kid at 9 years old.
Well, I mean, what do you remember? And not to be kind of blaming or negative, but do you see, looking back, that a lot of my guests that wanted to be artists or authors, a lot of times they got the message from people around them that you got to go get a real job. You can't do that.
Oh, we got that a lot. Well, it was much later. I was, much later when I was in high school. When my parents started becoming concerned, I was really spending too much time studying magic and working on things. When I was 14, I was already doing shows for the local Optimist Club and Lions Club and whatever. And actually, when I went to college, it was in the 60s. In '67, I started college. at that time, I was doing magic shows. I was making money. It helped me through college. I was making money doing shows, while I was in college. And then after my sophomore year in college, I dropped out of school and went to New York City. And there I started. I was supposed to be doing alternative service for the draft.
Mm-hmm.
I was called for my physical and flunked the physical. So I ended up having to support myself in New York, and I started doing magic on the streets, and that's how I began doing magic really for a living.
When I was preparing for the show, I saw that you flunked your physical from your eyesight. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I would have never guessed that a magician, can see real good.
Oh, no, I have I see fine as long as I have contacts or glasses on, but I have very bad vision, very, very nearsighted vision. But I was the first, conscientious objector to the military in my county, in Pitt County, North Carolina. I went through a lot of trouble to get the status, and moved up to New York and dropped out of college in order to do my alternative service at New York University Hospital. And so all that just went away with one physical. Once I took the physical, I didn't have to go through any of that.
Well, tell us, what was driving inside of you now that you look back? I mean, what did you go to college for, and what made you drop out? And, did you know then you wanted to be on the street? Was that calling you?
Well, it wasn't being on the street that was calling me. I was, that was something that's just a way to make a living. I had I'd been in college for a couple of years and started out as an English major and then moved to philosophy. I was not particularly motivated in any particular field, but I was very interested and involved in what was going on in politics around me, the anti-war movement, first the civil rights movement, then the anti-war movement. I got involved in those quite a bit. And I went to, I started working at the Catholic Worker in New York City. That was run by Dorothy Day, who, a very famous lady who later, I knew her there and was influenced by her. And she's practically on her way to sainthood in the Catholic Church now, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What about, in your high school days, did you have any other hobbies, and were you good at sports? Or did you have a lot of discipline? Did you really have a hard drive?
I'm very I'm a dreamer kind of person, and I was not much into sports. The only sports I played, I wrestled. I was on the wrestling team in high school for a little while. It was terrible. And later in college, I fenced. But I was pretty good at that. But, I was not much into sports or team activities, and was mostly a reader and thinker and dreamer, and I liked performing. I was a very shy kid, a nerdy kid in high school, and, very shy, and it took me a long while to work my way out of that.
Yeah. I find that remarkable. A lot of the guests that say that they were very introverted and shy, yet they're public speakers or like in your case, performers. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a paradox or whatever you want to call that, how we work ourselves through that. It's always a remarkable thing to me.
Yeah, well, I think that too, it's like, you decide to come out, an inward person has to work hard to look at it. There was a line, I think, from Phil Oakes, a song from Phil Oakes, I can't remember the song, but basically he said that we marvel at the people who manage to hide their fears. The wallflower marvels at those who manage to hide their fears.
Well, that is.
I think that's what it is.
Yeah. Again, looking back, I say that only because for myself, and it seems like listening to guests, we never really know it at the time until we kind of do. But, did you have a sense of yourself? Were you right with yourself early on, or did you have fear and doubt and all that stuff?
Well, no, I was, to tell you the truth, in the 60s, like 68 to 72, I was so fueled by anger, by the anti-war movement, by the civil rights movement, by things about being arrested and beat up, and all the things that were going on at that very exciting time. That I had no thought to my future. Or, I get a lot of people at that time really didn't know that we would. I think after the Cuban Missile Crisis, my generation, a lot of us thought there wasn't going to be a future, and we probably wouldn't live past 30.
Yeah.
The world was probably going to blow up or something. I think the attitude back then was totally different.
Mm-hmm. And that's just something you found yourself in. I mean, that's just the way it was. Yeah.
It was the 60s.
Yeah. I had a guest on a while back, Father Bill, and he was very involved in those things as well. And he said something profound to me. He said, really, he believes that era probably was the greatest era ever for change and positive change. He kind of said if it wouldn't have been for the drugs and alcohol that kind of took over the hippie movement, it probably would have been the greatest event of the century. Well,
I agree with him on that. I think so too.
There was a lot of change.
A lot of wonderful change did come out of it.
Yes,
especially for women, and the civil rights movement has been so incredible. Beyond my belief, what I learned, I grew up in the Jim Crow South. So it was a huge and wonderful thing, that happened down there.
What was going on? You had to work through what you believed. You were getting some negative.
Well, I worked for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in North Carolina for a while, and then I worked with Golden Frings, who was the state field secretary of the SCLC. I was a speechwriter for him and kind of a secretary to him, went in demonstrations and stuff like that. And then I started working with Larry Little, the head of the Black Panthers in North Carolina, and collecting money for the breakfast program for the Black Panthers. And now he was on last time I heard from him, he was on the Greensboro Chamber of Commerce and then City Council.
It's wild how that works out,
Sure.
Just listening to your story already, it's amazing how, for whatever reason, and you were a part of it, that you've been exposed and met and been around some great change over the years,
it's been amazing to change. Yeah, in this lifetime, it's been quite amazing.
Yeah, and some of the things we talk about in spirituality is change, and you've been in some sort of position or found yourself there, so that's really cool. I had no idea either, Pop, that those kind of names would come out of you. I just had no idea.
Well, after that period in New York, I worked on the streets to support myself. I did the shell game on the streets and took people's money at the shell game. This was there hadn't been a shell game or a three-card monte game on the streets of New York for about 20 years, and nobody even knew what it was much. And the police used to come, and they would just watch it. They thought it was funny.
Yeah.
It wasn't even illegal. I mean, it was, but they didn't enforce it. There was much more important things going on. They just thought it was funny. But I didn't really know how to. I was taught by, that old gambler, and I learned it, as a magician kind of trick. I never really learned how to use the shills and the whole rigmarole to make real money off it, to make it really good. I made as much money doing magic tricks and passing the hat.
Yeah.
So eventually I started doing that instead. I really made more money doing the card tricks and passing the hat, and that's when I started becoming a real magician, I guess.
Well, what led to, when you decided to go to New York, that was strictly to work off that, or did you want to be?
I was going to New York University to work as an alternative service, and then when that didn't happen, when I didn't have to do that, they didn't want me at the hospital. They wanted people that they had for a good 2 years, for sure, to train them, because they were training them in inhalation therapy and other things.
Yeah.
So I had like a total of about 3 weeks on the job at New York University Hospital, and then the physical came, and they took the job away, so I was on the streets and doing magic. It was kind of a magic carpet, though. I found I could put a deck of cards in my pocket and walk down the street. If I came to a record store and I wanted an album, I could turn around and take out the cards and start doing card tricks on the street until I had enough money to go in and buy the record. If I wanted something to eat, I'd go in front of the restaurant and make some money, and it was not very much of a business, really. It was more like a magic carpet. Yeah. And after a couple of years of that, and I worked while I was doing that, I worked at the Catholic Work, and I worked with the Military Counseling Organization, a CCCO, a Quaker organization. And I went back to college at Lynchburg College in Virginia and finished a degree in philosophy. And was kind of at that point converted back to Christianity and went to Virginia Theological Seminary in Alexandria and started studying for the Episcopal ministry.
That's wild. I read that. And, I mean, how does that come about? Can you tell us? I mean, did one day you just woke up and decided that
it was
you get back
philosophy?
Into it?
I found myself going through philosophy and not finding anything that was really satisfying or anything that was really what I was looking at, something that would be a base for it, And as I started studying C.S. Lewis and some other writers, fantasy writers for the most part. I just began reading some of C.S. Lewis's Christian fantasy, and then some others, and eventually it just kind of like called me, and I just was moved by it. When I went to seminary, and I was in seminary for 2 years, and I loved everything about theology and archaeology. I went to St. George's College in Jerusalem and studied archaeology for a while, and I loved the courses in Greek and Hebrew and New Testament studies and all of that. But then when I first started working in the church, I realized I didn't really like the politics of actually working with people in the church and fighting with the altar guild and trying to get things done. So I was having second thoughts about the whole process, and after my second year in seminary, and then I was doing magic tricks at a faculty party, a sherry party, and the faculty and the students were there, and I was doing card tricks, and this old professor tapped me on the shoulder, and his name was Reginald Fuller. He was an English man, a very thin, bird-like little man, very charming, wonderful guy with little glasses and balding, and he tapped me on the shoulder. He says, "Whitney, may I speak with you?" And I went, "Sure." And he called me off, and we went off, and he says, when you do those little magic tricks, you light up like a firecracker. Have you ever thought of doing that for a living? Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, Professor, I've done it for a living. I've worked on the streets for a couple of years in New York City and D.C. and other places and made a living doing magic, and I love magic. It was very fun, but I want to do something relevant." Mm-hmm. Which was a big word back in '72.
Yeah, still a big word.
And he looked at me and he pulled his glasses off and he says, "Well, it's not as if the Lord needs you." And I go, "Excuse me?" He said, "Well, the Lord is perfectly capable of saving the world all by himself. He really doesn't need your help." And I go, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, if the Lord wants you to be a saint or a martyr, he'll call you and you'll want to go. Until such time, you should make yourself busy doing the things that make you happy and that you love. Whatever God gives you a love for something, that's his greatest gift. And if it brings you joy, it'll bring him joy. It'll be his pleasure, for you to find joy in doing what you love." And boy, that just hit me, as a liberating moment. The idea that no, God doesn't really need you. The world spins on its own, and it's good to do all these good things. It's also good to do the things that make you happy and the things that bring joy instead of always, fighting so hard, And it was a relief. And a few weeks later, I left out of the seminary. I was back doing magic and joined a theater company and went to Tennessee and been doing magic ever since.
That's so cool to hear. That's what I love about doing the show and listening to you guys because, I had no idea that, but that certainly was a life-changing, for some reason you heard Dr.
Liberating, very life-changing. You know, I think if everybody realized that God doesn't need us to stick up for him. He doesn't need us to defend his name. He doesn't need us to protect him. You know, he lets us do things for our sake because it gives us joy. But he doesn't need our help.
I love how you process it the way you did without getting your ego crushed too much, or I guess you had to sort that out.
Well, getting your ego crushed is something that should happen on a regular basis if possible.
It's a blessing. It's always a blessing, but it stings a little bit. You know, listening to your story so far, though, it seems like you always had that calling inside of you to do what you sensed was right and to help other people, you know, to do something good. You said you had...
you know, I think what happens, though, is that you forget that you can do good by doing the little things. You know, that Gerard Manley Hopkins wrote a poem, The Wind Hover. He was a monk, and he was talking about how a lot of times we want to do great things for God. We want to do, you know, the big, you know, martyrdoms or being saints or being something great and changing the world. And he says, but the real job is here on the farm, taking care of the animals and the crops and the day-to-day things. And, you know, that if God needs you or calls you to do something else, that's a special thing.
Those are lessons I know for myself that come slowly and kind of hard. I don't always recognize that stuff.
Yeah, me too. What do you mean you don't need me?
Don't you know who I think I am? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I got to ask you this. This has been compelling me. When you're on that street performing, and in that time period, or even in this time period, I guess. But I mean, how did you?
I haven't worked on the street since that time period, really.
Right.
You know, it's once you get a little older and can't run as fast.
Well, my question is though, how did you navigate through all the distractions? You know, drugs, alcohol, women, you know, all that stuff. Because it seems to me that you were in a position, or you were in places where, I don't know if seedy is the right word, or, you know, on the street.
Seedy would be one. That would be a very nice description of some of the places I was. But I was also in some very nice places too. You know, it was pretty wonderful. I worked on the streets in London and did the Derby, and I worked in Israel and France, and you know, there's so many places that that I worked the streets, and there were some wonderful experiences. I saw beautiful countries and countryside, and was able to travel like a magic carpet, you know, anywhere I wanted to go. That's
so cool. So there must have been some drive in you that you just recognized what you needed or what was next to be done, and you didn't get too distracted for too long. Is that right?
Well, no, I went through the same distractions that everybody else did. I went through 2 marriages and, you know, gone through, you know, experimentation with drugs and other things, just like everybody else, and, you know, made it through, managed with luck, and, you know, I think with God's help to avoid, you know, any serious problems and, you know, to survive and be successful now.
I would guess grace played a factor in there. How did you teach yourself? I mean, what's it take to learn how to juggle? Or you ride a unicycle, or you did?
Yeah, I used to I would ride a unicycle. I did fire eating and juggling, and I worked in a carnival for a while in college in the summers. I worked with the Guthrie shows in the South, and so I learned a few sideshow skills, and you know, did some talking I talked for the Spidora, which was an illusion where the girl had the head of a woman and the body of a spider. She'll talk to you. She'll tell you her sad story. She's alive. She's real.
Yeah, there you go. But, I mean, through this time, it never crossed your mind, even you said you were doing shows in college and those things, it never really crossed your mind that until maybe after Dr. Fuller spoke to you, and I'm guessing this, please answer it, that you could actually market it or market yourself or allow someone to help you, or actually,
I think it was not
have
that
a
so much
PR
as I always thought I could do. I realized I could make a living doing magic. I done not a good living, but I could survive doing magic on the streets. I was beginning to get to the point where I realized I could probably start doing magic for a living. But I really wanted to do something more important, something more relevant, something was not so silly. And I think what it was is Dr. Fuller gave me the freedom to do something that's really not that important and maybe is a little silly, but still wonderful.
So and it brings you joy, right?
It brings me joy.
Yeah.
But God gave me a talent when I was very young for magic and for fraud and deception, and I think He wants me to develop that talent and use it for His sake.
That's so cool you put those words out there. Typically, I relate those words as negatives, fraud and deception.
Well, even Jesus admired a clever thief, didn't he? He admired him for his cleverness, not for his theft. And he recommended that we all be as clever as the thief.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
And I think that sometimes, especially trusting people, Christians, they can fall victim to bad thinking and fraud and charlatanry. Because they don't think about it, and so it's important sometimes to have people remind us that we're not as smart. There was Eric Severide. You remember him?
Yes.
He was the commentator on television, one of those Olympian, haired gods. They used to talk on TV. He was wonderful. But when about 1973, when Doug Henning did the magic show on Broadway, Eric Severide came on television and said, I saw this young man do a show on television last night, and it was wonderful, on the stage last night in Broadway, and it was wonderful. And I had no idea how he cut the lady in half or floated her in the air or any of these wonderful tricks he did. I had no idea how they were done. And it reminded me of something my father told me once. He said, Eric, there's only two kinds of people in the world. There's people that can be had, and there's suckers. And the difference between them is that everybody can be had, but a sucker is a special kind of person that'll bet you $50 he cannot be had. He said, and that always stuck with me, and I think maybe magicians are those people here to remind us we can all be had so we don't become suckers. I laughed. I thought, well, that's like a mission statement.
That inspired you, huh? At that point,
it did. I always since thought, magic is one of the things that helps keep us from the superstition. Mm-hmm. If you go into countries where magic as a stage act has not been very popular, some of the Indonesia and other countries, they still believe magic is real, and they have not had the experience of Penn and Teller and other people to show them how easily they can be fooled by psychic surgeons, or medicine men, or many other charlatans that are around selling magnetized water and bracelets that'll help you keep your balance, and foot baths that'll take the lead and other poisons right out of the pores of your feet. Well, this stuff is going on here in this country too. I think magicians are around maybe to remind people of some of these things. And right now, I'm doing a medicine show where I'm taking the part of a 1990s, 1910 medicine show performer who does magic and has fake devices, medical devices, and sells patent medicines. And I get to go over all the kind of trickery and charlatanry that you hear on television all the time. I get to kind of resonate with it and make people recognize it for what it is.
Yeah. I saw that. Yeah, that's
JamWow.
Well, what happened then after Dr. Fuller spoke to you? I mean, what are the next things? What are the next steps you took?
I started back working on the streets again, and then I joined a theater company, went to Johnson City, Tennessee, with a populist political theater called the Road Company. They were doing bicentennial-oriented dramas about the early state of Franklin and the Jeffersonian politics and all of that stuff. This was about the time, 76 coming up, our bicentennial. So that was when I worked in theater, and that was good for me. I learned acting skills. I had a director who taught acting, and I became, I picked up a lot of different skills. I did fire eating and juggling for the company to help draw crowds to our performances, and then I would I would work as an actor within the performances.
That's cool. Now, do you know, at that point, after you made those decisions and did that, was becoming a minister and like in the traditional sense, was that kind of out of your dream at that point?
I had gone fully into working as an artist, fully into working as a magician and performer, working on skills. I shortly went in, began working at an amusement park in Kentucky as their magician and opening act for all the Grand Ole Opry people. I used to open for, I opened for Conway Twitty and Loretta Lynn and Bill Monroe and just about all of the Bill Anderson, just about all the old Grand Ole Opry people.
So tell us a little bit about, I mean, when you're on the road, was it lonely? Were you surrounded by other people? Are you getting other positive input? Or are you kind of a rogue? Are you kind of out there on your own?
Well, no, I always had friends in the, artist community, other actors and performers. And street performers all, have a network. Although when I was really doing street performing, it was, back in the 60s, there weren't any other street performers. Most of that only started in the 70s. There was only one other guy in New York working on the streets when I was doing it, and that was Jeff Sheridan, who worked in the Central Park. I worked down in the city, down in the West Village.
Did you guys work that out and discuss what sector was going to be yours?
No, I didn't even know him. I just happened to be doing the same thing at the time he was, and he was doing what's called a round show, where he draws a big crowd in the park. I was doing a street show where I actually was working in like a jewelry store window as kind of the stage, and my audience was actually the sidewalk, full of people. And I would stop traffic sometimes, and that was what got me in trouble.
Yeah.
With the police. The people couldn't get through the sidewalk because there was 30 people standing there looking in this window.
Well, obviously you honed your craft, and you must be exceptionally good at it. And I mean, so what's it like working up close like that with sleight of hand or whatever the word is?
Well, I still do a lot of working up close with sleight of hand. I do a lot of corporate events, and trade shows and hospitality suites and private parties and stuff where I'll be doing my favorite magic, which is the sleight of hand, the close-up, the shell game, and three-card monte, and tricks with cards and coins and, small objects. And, that's my favorite stuff. Even on stage, I do all sleight of hand magic, even though it's bigger sleight of hand with newspapers and ropes and rings and things of that nature. It's still all based on sleight of hand. And then, the big mechanical tricks, I did those for a few years in the amusement parks. We had a show where we had 3 or 4 fairly good-sized illusions, floating a lady and cutting her in thirds and all that stuff. But I had an assistant plus my wife and all this equipment to carry around, and it became like a real job, and it wasn't fun for me. And keeping 3 people together and not fighting and traveling together and everything is really like a real job. So I quickly went back to doing a one-person show. Now I'm turning back around. I'm working on a show with a whole lot of other acts and a whole lot of other people, and that's very exciting and fun. The medicine show is going to be a variety show. But it's
oh, that's nice.
It's a lot of fun.
Well, you needed to make a living. I mean, what was going on there when you're making these decisions, or did you just kind of find yourself doing the next thing? Or a lot of
times it's about a lot of just what opens up for you. I went with the theater company to this Johnson City, Tennessee, and there. I moved to eventually after a couple of years of that, I went to this place just a little bit north where I heard they were looking for a magician, and that was the amusement park, Tombstone Junction. I worked there for a couple of years and fell in love with a lady and married her, and she and I left Kentucky and went to Los Angeles because I wanted to see the Magic Castle and see what was going on there. So we came out here, and I got involved in the Magic Castle in '77, and my daughter was born in '79, and then at that time I won Stage Magician of the Year, my first award from the Magic Castle.
And that's a big deal.
It is a big deal. It's like the Academy Awards for magic.
Yeah, I mean, so that's what happened. I mean, I guess it's kind of a small world as far as a network of, top-end magicians go around the world.
Yes, it is a small world, but there's pretty close and very friendly group.
Yes, yeah. That's what's so cool about it. What an honor that must have been the first time.
Well, it was, and plus I got to meet an awful lot of magicians who have been like heroes of mine since I was a kid, and I got to be friends and had mentors among some of the great magicians. So that was a huge, plus for me. I came here and there was Vernon was out here. Di Vernon was at the Magic Castle. Billy McComb and so many Joe Casari, so many Tony Giorgio, so many famous sleight of hand experts. And I learned an awful lot from all of them.
What's it like hanging out with you guys? I mean, do you guys guard all your secrets? Are you pretty much open?
Among ourselves, we're very free most part, especially among your friends, sharing information and, talking about stuff. And magicians are huge fun to be around. They're jokesters, and they like to do practical jokes, and they have a wild sense of humor, and, they'll say anything that comes into their head. Magicians are kind of like comics in that way. They can't pass by a good joke. They have to say it might get them in trouble.
Well, we get to sort through all that, and that's really cool that you're giving us, like, I'm almost like I'm there, listening to you. That's what the camaraderie and all that. And
they used to play hearts up in the library at the Magic Castle. These old men in their 70s and 80s. Akuta Bucks was the man with the X-ray eyes in vaudeville. He was from Kashmir, and he looked like Omar Sharif. Only he was in his 90s. He was almost 90, I think, and he was nearly blind from retinitis pigmentosa. He only had about 10% of his vision left. And the week he died, he was still doing his blindfold act on the stage at the Magic Castle. Well, but he was playing hearts with Di Vernon, who is one of the great card cheats that ever lived, And Vernon says, "You're reneged. Good, you're reneged. Put on your blindfold."
Yeah. How do you guys pass the time playing cards?
You can't see without it now, huh?
How do you guys pass the time playing cards? Everybody must have been on edge a little bit, right?
Oh, no, that was the most fun ever. Of course, magicians play with a sense of honor, that it's perfectly okay to cheat, but if you get caught, you have to admit it and drop out of the pot.
That's one of those unwritten rules among magicians. Huh?
Yes.
But that's really cool. And even the gentleman you spoke about that was 90 and continued performing, that just shows that we can follow our dream and do what we're called to do right to the end.
Yes. Well, you're only young once, but you can be immature practically your whole life, I've discovered.
Yeah, I've been finding that out too. So,
I told my mother when I was 9, I want to be a magician when I grow up. She says, "Nonsense. You can't do both."
Well, it's worked.
I think she was right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you picked the right one, I guess. So, and I got to say this. I don't think I've ever said this to a guest, but you were quite a dashing. I'm sure you're still a dashing man, but you were. You must not have had any problem with the ladies coming to you and being a performer, huh?
Oh no, being a performer, especially in the '60s and '70s, was one of the greatest times you could have. It was a wonderful time.
Sounds to me like you've lived so far. You've lived your dream. I mean, having a lot of fun doing what you like, and
I've lived both my dream and my nightmares.
Well, that's the only way. We got to live them both, I guess, so we can enjoy. You know what I mean? So we have some point of reference.
Right, I think so. Well, it's all good. It's it's all important. It's all part of the package.
Tell us about.
I feel very blessed and lucky that God has allowed me to follow my love. Some people don't get to because of circumstances or other things, and things get in the way, and luckily I managed to be able to do what I wanted to do.
And
gotten away with murder, in my opinion. It's just, I just feel I've been very blessed, very lucky.
after you were out there, now this is in the late 70s, I believe is where you're at. You got your first award. You continued to just perform. Is that correct? And also, didn't people, your peers or the newer guys, did they come to you and did they start running things by you, their ideas?
Oh yeah, that's I get a lot of people come to me for advice or consultation and for lessons, and I teach a course at the Magic Castle every year for the last 16 years called School for Scoundrels.
Yes.
Where I teach magicians how to do the shell game and three-card monte and the endless chain and the other street swindles, street scams.
So I just find it awesome to listen to this. You know what I mean? Here you are. You have a degree in philosophy. You have a lot of theological background, and yet you're teaching people how to be deceiving and scoundrels.
Oh yes, I'm not really encouraging anyone to be a scoundrel to use this to make money. We do it. The people who take the class are other magicians or historians or gambling experts or police. I do a lot of talking with police, and I have a lot of friends that have published books that I've consulted on among police on carnival fraud and gambling and on con games, the street, what's called short cons.
Mm-hmm. Well,
that's all a part of it. If somebody in our class, and we've had people from our forum on the line, and we've had people from our class who have gone on to do magic on the streets and do the shell game or get involved with that, but that's their business. I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think it's good for the person doing it. I don't really feel bad for the suckers that get taken. I think they're really asking for it. It's kind of a push. Mm-hmm. Nobody gets taken unless he thinks he has an unfair advantage on the operator. He always thinks he sees the corner of the card bin.
That's the challenge.
He saw a little flash of that. He knows what shell is under. So he's going to take advantage of the guy and cheat him. And that's when he gets taken.
Well, there's some truth. There is truth in that. So that's
one of the reasons the police don't have much sympathy for the victims in those situations.
Right.
But for the practitioner, for the operator, you spend your life repeating the same story over and over again. And you're beginning to look at people as if they're all suckers. Mm-hmm. Kind of like a psychiatrist thinks everybody's crazy and a cop thinks everybody's a crook because that's the only people he runs into.
Yes. Yeah.
If you're a con man, you're always looking for and finding the suckers.
Yeah. Kind of the law of attraction.
It's not a good healthy way to go.
No. So, but you seem to sort all that out. Luckily, it sounds to me like I'm not sure if it was even luck, but that you have a good heart and you always had some sense of right and wrong for yourself.
Well, yeah, I think it's more your concern for people. It's, there's different things that can keep you on the right track. For one thing, I have very bad facial recognition, and that's a terrible thing for a con man and a thief. You have to know when you've taken somebody. If somebody's walking up towards you and you don't know who they are, you don't remember that you took them for $10,000. That person's going to deck you, or worse. So a con man that doesn't recognize faces very well and can't remember names and faces is not going to do very well in that profession. That's one of the things that kept me out of the big time.
Well, whatever it takes, Pop. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, God's little blessing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, so it's going into the 80s, and you're at the Magic Castle. You moved to L.A. How long have you been married at that time?
Oh well, we just got married in about 77, and my first child was born in 79. So about the time I went to the castle, the first time was 77, 76, somewhere in there. So,
and that's what you're doing then for the next number of years, decade. You're going there, you're performing live.
I've been based in California, and I started working with different. Did some stuff with the movie people out here, and did some stuff with people in Vegas, and. I was one of the acts that helped start the Caesar's Magical Empire in Vegas, which lasted for several years. It was a big magic place in Caesar's. And I worked on Norman Jewison film Bogus with Whoopi Goldberg and Gerard Depardieu, and I did all the consultants, all the magic consultancy for that. So I did over those years. I did all kinds of different, working for corporate events and trade shows and cruise ships. Spent 15 years working the cruise ships.
That must have been cool.
Almost all the lines.
That must have been cool. What kind of nice fringe benefits there? You took a lot of cruises, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, you were like first-class passenger for, I only work one night a week usually. So I'd be cruising the rest of the week and just one night a week or sometimes two would have to do a show.
And the family would come along with some of those?
Yes. I had my daughter came along. My wife came along sometimes, but most of the time not.
Okay.
They had things, school and work and other things to keep them home, so I'd have to travel. It's one of the hard parts of it. You'd be gone for 3 or 4 weeks at a time.
Now,
and so I didn't like that particularly, so I eventually quit that.
Now, at this time, how does a guy, are you marketing yourself? Do you have somebody? How does somebody find
I'm marketing myself right now. I'm working on this show, which is a very new and different direction for me. The last 7-8 years I've been playing Pop Haydn, doing this character from 1910, who's a time traveler and an adventurous, kind of a steampunky character. And all new magic that I've invented with it involves Tesla coils and a teleportation device and a matter transmogrifier, all these machines that do the magic instead of me. I link borrowed finger rings together with the matter transmogrifier, and it has like all these lightning strike stuff goes around the rings, and they go back to the link. And they're people's wedding rings, three wedding rings from the audience. I do one where I borrow a dollar bill and people write their name on it, and they take a corner off, they'll keep a serial number, copy, the serial number, take a corner off, and then I shoot it from the teleportation device. It goes into a raw lemon and then into an egg that the person is holding, a raw egg the person is holding. So it's a lot of fun. These are my own tricks that I've invented, but they're all kind of like steampunk inventions rather than like magic. It's supposedly wild science, not magic. So it's a lot of fun. Being 63, and I'm working with a lot of the young kids from the sideshow and burlesque communities, and having so much fun with the kind of artsy theater crowd. And for me, it's just very stimulating and fun to be around these young performers.
Yeah. What I'm sensing that your wife must really be a good sport. What are you doing at home?
She is a saint.
Well, I'm visualizing.
She's Nancy McGill. Nancy McGill is. We've been married for over 10 years, and she's just a very helpful. She was a very normal person in most ways till she met me. But everybody's, I guess, entitled to one mistake. But she's been a huge support. She's loved. She quit her job to come join the circus. Basically, she and I work together. We're together 24/7, and that's cool. Really nice. When we work together at home. So we're home during the day, and she goes to the shows with me, and we're constant companions, and it's just wonderful. I have 2 grandkids in the area, so we can babysit. We're not far from 40 minutes from my grandkids.
That's wonderful. Following your dream affords you all that, right?
What? Pardon?
I said following your dream and seeking that out affords you all that.
I've been able to do what I wanted to do and get away with it, and still have a pretty normal life.
Cool. When you were talking about the newest tricks that you invented, you must be practicing that stuff at home. I had visions of like broken eggs all over the kitchen floor, and like you're out in the crowd.
So I just finished working on the Tesla. I had to rebuild the Tesla coil, and I don't have a workshop really, so it was like spread out on the dining room table, on the kitchen table, and out on the patio, and three big work tables for the last 3 days. So it's just now got it back assembled yesterday.
That's nice. I love it.
And she's very tolerant. She just waits till that passes, and then she just cleans up after.
Shaking her head, right?
Yeah.
That's good. Listen, how did the book come up?
She says it's never boring. You know, how many husbands are, fooling around with 250,000 volts in your kitchen?
Yeah, right. I hope you never gave her the old, listen, I can make you disappear. You never want to throw that one out there. What about...
no, I wouldn't threaten I would never threaten or make any ultimatums to Nancy McGill. I think that would be a mistake.
Yeah, it sounds to me like you guys are meant for one another. How did the book come about?
I think she I don't know what she did. It's probably something in a past life.
That's funny. How did the book come about, Pop?
Well, actually, it was originally just a lecture for the Magic Castle. A few years ago, I was asked to talk to the magicians about working on the street and what my experiences were like and what I learned, about show business that helps me still today from working on the street. And so basically I gave a lecture where I just told my experiences and told what I learned from each of the people I met traveling and, interesting characters that I met on the street and con men and crooks and, performers and other people. And, they loved it and went over very well. And so somebody saw my lecture notes and Camby's decided he'd like to publish the book as a booklet. So he basically came to me and asked me if we would write it up for this publication for the general public. I had never considered writing something for the general public. I didn't think anybody would be interested in these experiences unless they were in show business. Mm-hmm. But it seems to have gotten very much interest around for people that just want to hear about how somebody follows their dream and, all of that.
That's reaffirming to me, too, because the book sounds like people do want to hear about following our dreams and about our life experiences. That's what we try to give here as a platform for people to share that. Did you know that gentleman prior? How did you guys meet?
Well, he was a member of the Magic Castle, an amateur magician, and he has his own book publishing company, and he had wanted to publish a book on magic, and he had seen my booklet and just thought it was something that would be of more general interest in most magic books.
That's cool. And then we talk sometimes about angels or people placed in front of us or the right time, serendipity, right, whatever it is. That's why I wanted to ask that. It's so cool when I hear the answers.
I always kind of feel like if you take a step in the direction you should be going in, it'll step towards you. Mm-hmm. Your future will step towards you. And I think that's the main thing, is you got to just move in the direction you want to go, and any movement is better than none. But a lot of times I found that, all the odd directions I've taken, learning to spin a rope, studying history, having an interest in the Civil War, all little things that you never would have thought would have anything to do with magic. Mm-hmm. Toward the end of my life, I've it's 63, not toward the end of my life, but toward the end of my career, and I'm starting all over like a kid with a whole new adventure, and it all brings it all together. Haydn uses all the historical knowledge, all the knowledge of the old con men and, medicine men and the pitch shows and the carnival. Just about everything I've ever done seems to come into being with his character. So it's like super funny. It's like, there weren't any wrong roads that I took. They all came back to here. Mm-hmm. I had to take all of them in order to get where I am now.
Isn't that so kind of relieving to finally see that, though? I mean, I guess we take every road we took to get to where we are, and that to really, be grateful for that is cool.
Right. A lot of times you're taking something that looks like it doesn't go anywhere. I was learning to spin a rope, for example. I went to a cowboy festival. I saw somebody spin a rope. I thought, I started playing with that stuff. But I learned it and then put it away. Well, then now I'm playing this cowboy, this character out of the Old West, and that comes in really handy to actually show that you can spin a rope, ride a horse, and do all the things you need to be from 1890s.
That's cool. I love it. Tell us, without giving up too much of the book, I mean, what can you like condense a couple of things? What have you learned about life?
Well, I'll give you an example. There's a lot of stories in there of people that I've met and what I learned from them. One of the best stories was the captain. I was doing a show on the streets in New York, somewhere around 6th Avenue and 8th Street. And this guy on a wheelchair is sitting there. He's got a captain's hat on, and he's a very disheveled-looking guy in his late 50s. And he has no legs. His legs are cut off just about at the pelvis. And he's in this wheelchair. And I finished my show, and he comes wheeling up. He goes, "What's your name?" And I go, "Whitney." He goes, "Come with me, Whitney." And he spins and just starts off down the side. Just packed up my stuff and walked along behind him. And after a few blocks, he comes to a bar, and he parks his wheelchair outside the bar and goes inside on his hands, and comes up to a bar stool and picks himself up with his hands and throws himself up on this bar stool and starts yelling for everybody to pay attention. "Come over here. This is my son, Whitney. He's going to show you some magic." Bam! You're on, Whit. Bam! And so I started doing magic for the people in the bar. He takes off his hat and gets off the stool and marching around on his hands, comes up to each person, sits down, picks up his hat, and has him put $1 or whatever in it and puts it back in. He goes around. It's hysterical, like a monkey almost, just on his hands, just crawling up and then telling people what to do and ordering them around. And pretty soon, next thing I know, he had $45-50 in his hat, and he split it even with me and said, "I'll see you tomorrow night." And sure enough, the next few nights we went to different places and pulled the same stunt. And he collected the money, and so it was, I learned a lot about how to take a crowd and how to just order people around. And one of the things he told me that always stuck with me, he says, you say too many nice, you're too polite. You're from the South. You always say thank you and would you please and all this. He says people don't want to hear that crap all day. He says when you're doing a show, you should be like a director. A director will just say, would you, instead of would you please take a card, he says, take a card, show it to them, put it back in the deck, shuffle it. So you wouldn't say, would you please take a card now, would you please put it back now, would you? He said, that just slows everything down, nobody wants to hear it. He says, people don't mind you being in charge and being the director when you're the performer. Just take charge, tell them what to do, be polite, be nice, but just direct them. Don't do all that, would you please, and thank you very much, and all this kind of stuff. He said that just slows things down, and it makes the show less powerful.
So you carried that.
It turns out that was some of the best advice I ever got, and I still think is very true.
Mm-hmm. That is good. What, again, we talked, what else do you want to say about the book? I mean, what are some of the other lessons?
Well, I think there's very little in it. You're not going to learn much magic. There's nothing in it secret except for a couple of tricks that I explained because they're essential to understanding, what was really going on. And they're tricks. The two tricks that I do explain are something anybody could do or learn to do, but they're a lot of fun. There's one called the routine for the blind that I actually use when I'm working for a blind person. Mm-hmm. It's magic, an ESP trick that anybody can do in the ESP survey. But other than that, everything else in the book is just stories of my experiences in the United States and in Europe, and meeting people on the streets, and what I learned about God and life and people from working on the streets.
What a wonderful concept it really is, and that, maybe one of the reasons we're captivated with magic and sleight of hand is it is humbling to us, and we get whether you're old or whether you're young, you see it looking out at the crowd. I'm guessing that no matter what age the person is, we have that same look on our face. Like
yes.
Yeah. But it is humbling to know that, maybe everything isn't as it appears.
Yeah, that's it. Well, it's a good lesson to keep in mind too. Whenever other people are involved, there's a possibility of fraud. Mm-hmm. There's a possibility that somebody's not telling the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we can all fall victim to that if we're not careful.
Listen, the listeners can get your book straight off my website, but where else? How do people contact you, and how do they get the book?
Well, they can get the book. It's on sale at most all the sites. They can get it, at the Amazon or Barnes and Noble, any place. But to get in touch with me, it's best to go to pophaydn.com, which is also a great place. I have a lot of video of my medicine show and my magic show and photographs and information. That is a lot of fun. And that's at pophaydn.com. There's no E in Haydn. It's spelled like Haydn, Haydn.
Yeah, and that was changed one time. Is that right?
Pardon?
That was changed when you were very young. Is that correct?
Yeah, I changed it to my stage name when I was in the early 70s. Billy McComb ordered me to change it. He was my mentor.
He ordered.
He introduced me in the Magic Castle a few times as Whit Haddon, and he stumbled over to Haddon, and he said, that's just Whit Haddon just doesn't flow. So go back to Whitney Haddon or make it Whit Haydn. And I said, well, Whit Haydn, that sounds pretty good. He said, well, and then they got into a big thing about how it should be spelled, and so people would remember it, and so it looked good on a marquee and all that. So we finally got that all straightened out to Whit Haydn. And then about 2005, when I was becoming a granddaddy, and people started calling me Pop, and I ended up being Pop Haydn, which was a better name, I thought, for the medicine show character.
Yeah, that's cool. That lesson seems to be recurring. The guy with no legs taught you that, but I guess that lesson was presented to you way earlier. You said your mentor didn't really ask you if you would please consider changing your name.
No, he just said, we're going to change your name.
That's cool.
But that was Billy McComb. Billy McComb, I would have done anything he said. He was from Belfast. He was one of the great magicians, in my opinion, of the 20th century, and one of the most charming men I ever knew.
Pop, it's been wonderful to listen to your experiences. I really appreciate you being on the show.
It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed talking with you.
Excellent, good. And it sounds like you're a man of honor, and you really bring, I hear the respect, and you hold the art in high regard, and I can just hear the genuineness of you, and I really, really appreciate it. I really do.
Thank you, Todd. Well, it's been a very great pleasure being with you this evening.
All right, thank you so much, Pop, for being on the show. Thank your wife for us, please. And
I sure will.
Okay, thank you.
Take care.
Good night.
God bless you.
There you have it. Whit Pop Haydn. What a guy, man. What a guy. Master magician. Really held in high regards throughout the world in the field. Thanks, everybody, for listening to the show. Let's see. Our next show is Thursday. That's October 25th, this Thursday at 5:30 p.m. We have Tom Sirignano. I'm sorry, Tom, I might have hacked that up. He's the author. The new book is called The Constant Outsider. It's the memoirs of a Boston mechanic. Real interesting guy. We've had the pleasure to communicate a little bit. I'm really looking forward to hearing his story. Thanks, everybody, for listening to the shows and supporting the show. We really, really are growing up. You can follow us on Facebook. Look up WEBE Radio. If you're on the site right now listening, which you are, click the follow button there on the Blog Talk Radio. Follow us there. You get an email of every show coming up, and just a reminder. That's all. It'll really help me. It'll help the show. It'll help us stay in contact. You can contact me through our website, www.weberadio.com. You can donate there if you like what we're bringing you. Help us defray the costs. You can send me suggestions, what we're doing good, what we're doing bad. Who you'd like to have on the show. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, you can do it all right through the website. So again, everybody, thank you so much, Whit Pop Haydn. What a real pleasure listening to your story. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Until next time, make it a great day.
Don't you know I'm still standing better than I ever did?
At WEBE Radio, we care about you.